Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm glad you could join me for our first video on our construction of our UH-1D Huey Gunship. So this is going to be part one. We're going to begin construction and do some scratch building modifications. Now this is how we left the helicopter in our last video. And if you've seen the last video, you'll know that we pointed out some problems here. One of them being the skids for our helicopter are slightly askew. So they are out of square and they do have a large amount of deflection. So we're going to take and see what we can do about fixing that. First thing we want to do is separate it from the sprues. Being as careful as we can, because this plastic, this polystyrene that Revell has used is fairly brittle. And it's not going to take a lot of bending or what have you to fracture it or break it. So our goal here is to get as much of this deflection as we can out of it. I'd be honestly happy if we get about half of that out. Of course, there are little bits and pieces on the bottom of our skids that we do need to trim off that might interfere with our straightening. So not really worried about cleaning up the ejection pin marks and stuff yet. So I'm also going to need the fuselage halves. So we're going to go ahead and separate these fuselage halves from the sprues that they're attached to. Now you're probably wondering, why do I need the fuselage at this point if I'm just straightening up the skids? And that's because I need to know how positively the skids actually sit on the bottom of the fuselage, and just to check and see what kind of contact we have and whether or not that's actually going to help us during the build process in eliminating a lot of the deflection and spring that we have in the skids. And they do seem to lock in very positively, and I think that's really going to help us with a whole lot of it. There's still a lot of spring in them though that I think we need to try to get that out, but well, I mean, try to eliminate as much of it as possible. So on to the game plan. So we're going to make sure that there's nothing on the bottom of the skids that are going to contact a piece of wood that I have here that we're going to clamp it to. So we're just going to trim that up. So the concept here is just to clamp it down onto a piece of wood that is preferably straight to start with. And we're just going to clamp it straight down so that we're not stretching the skids apart. We don't want to change that relationship. We just want to get rid of that deflection that we have going on, that twist. So here we're going to use a hairdryer for that. I'll put it on a high setting. Now, luckily for me, my board is long enough that I can hold down away from the hairdryer because it will get really, really hot. So the whole thing here is to heat it up as much as we possibly can without turning it into a blob of polystyrene. We don't want to melt the plastic. We just want to heat it up, and hopefully when it cools it will retain as much of that shape that we have it clamped into here as possible. Once we're done heating it, we need to wait until it's cool to the touch. You don't want to unclamp it while it's still hot, and we will take and remove the clamps and see what kind of progress we have. And it looks like we have removed most of it, and that's actually pretty good. Let's see if we can't get just a little bit more out of it. So what I've decided to do is use a construction shim, a wedge, to kind of elevate it in the opposite direction. We're going to clamp it down and reheat it and see what that gets it. So now after it's completely cool, take the clamps back off and we're going to see if we made any improvements at all. And as you can see here, we didn't really change it any, so I think once it's secured to the fuselage, it's going to be fine. So we're going to call that part good. So next up, we need to deal with our main rotors. We have one that is bowed considerably. So now, just looking down the edge of it, You can see how that one right there is really, really bowed. So we need to take a look at the next one and see how it is. And that one looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm not going to mess with that one. So now we just need to see if we can straighten the other one somewhat. So here I've clamped it to a straight shim, and then I'm using another shim to kind of bend it back in the opposite direction of the bow that's in our rotary. And we're just going to heat that up and see if we can remove that or get it straightened as much as we can. And it did take me 2 applications, but it doesn't look too bad. So I think we're going to call that good, and we're going to move on. Hopefully this thing doesn't curl back up later. So there are some fit issues here with the interior part of our helicopter. We need to kind of file down and straighten up this center section. Now this is where the engine mounts and the transmission for our rotors. And with these old kits, of course, you know, you kind of expect a lot of things to be filed down and straightened up. And I mean, we could do an entire video just on cleanup on this kit, and we're not going to do that. But we do need to check the fit. We want everything to seat properly and be as square as possible here. And we'll go ahead and fit the top portion of our cockpit too, if I can hold it all together. And just want to make sure that those seams kind of disappear. We don't want any gaps in there. So what I've decided to do is to temporarily affix these parts together, because we do need to check the fit inside the fuselage halves. So we're just going to use a little bit of tape, a little bit of mass tape here to temporarily put this together for us so we can check that fit. So now we're just going to insert it into the fuselage half here, and just to line it up with its tabs. It's got these little grooves that it needs to go into, and then we'll go ahead and put the other side on. We really want to pay attention to any fit issues that we have here. We want to get that fixed before we get everything painted up and try to install it. And to temporarily hold everything into place, a couple of rubber bands will do the job for us. And there we go. And it seems to all fit pretty good. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. So now would be a good time for us to check these doors. So these doors are supposed to be able to slide back and forth, and they do seem to fit pretty good. I'm kind of stoked about that. So we just checked the fit. Now, I did have to clean these doors up, of course, to get them to fit right, but yeah, that works. So next thing I'm kind of interested in seeing is going to be the balance that our helicopter has. The last thing we want to do is to get to this point where we've got the fuselage glued up, and then come to find out that we're going to have some sort of a balance issue where the helicopter wants to sit on its tail instead of on its on the skids. So I'm just going to set it there and right on the skids and check and see how it's balanced. And as we can see here, the balance is really not all that good. Now there's a lot of parts that are not put into the cockpit area yet. However, polystyrene is not that heavy. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to weight the interior down just a little bit on the front skids, and I'll show you what my solution to that is here when we get to that part. So now that we've addressed all of our major concerns with the kit, we're going to go ahead and flip over to step 1. And we're going to start our construction here. So there is some structural pieces that we need to put into the front of the cockpit area. And also we've got the seats to deal with. So we'll go ahead and work on the front structure there and clean up a lot of parts, and then take a look at our seats. Now, of course, we could do an entire video on this kit with just cleanup. Just want to cover some of the major areas here. These are the extensions that are on either side of our rudder control, and we just need to clean all that up, you know, sanding and whatever else we need to do to kind of reshape these and get them cleaned up. So we did have some fit issues here, of course. Now, this side right here I had a lot of trouble with, I think. No, it was the other side. This side seemed to fit pretty good. However, this other side I had to do a lot of trimming to actually get it to fit. I had to remove that tab that was on the inside of it, and also I had to trim away the inside of this little extension there for the pilot's foot. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to kind of block off the center console here. We're going to make a little compartment there, and the reason why we're going to do that is we need a place to add our weights, to add a little bit of ballast here to our helicopter. So I'm going to glue this piece of styrene in place, and with that done, we now have a little compartment there. And we've got these mixing balls. Now these are stainless steel balls that we're going to use for ballast. A little bit of extra weight there. Just inside the center console. Now I'm just going to use PVA glue here to kind of secure it. And we'll just dump some glue in there. And then we'll take and add some more ballast to it. And then we'll put another layer of glue on top of that. Now you could wait until that glue's all completely dry before adding the next layer, but you know, I'm going to do this, and it's going to be so much glue in there, we'll probably have to wait till overnight for everything to dry. Now that we got our ballast in place and it's all going to dry for us here, we've got plenty of time to work on the rest of the pieces in the cockpit, and that's cleaning up all these parts. Now, since we did glue that polystyrene in place, there is a locating tab here on the bottom of our instrument cluster that's supposed to slide up into that. So we don't have as much room as we did before we put that polystyrene in. So we're just going to trim that off right there and sand it down so that it'll be nice and clean. Now, whenever you're working with really thin parts, sometimes I like to leave them on the sprues. Just kind of cut those sprues out away from the rest of the parts, and that allows us to attend to any seam lines that we have here from the molds, and we can scrape and dress all that up. And where would we be without our sprue goo? We're going to use this sprue goo here to fill up some ejector pin marks we got on our I think they're elevator controls. Is that the elevators? I think so. And there are 2 of these ejector pin marks that are really prominent on each one of our controls. So we're going to need to fill those and sand those down. Now we're going to turn our attention to the seats. They're not very realistic. And we have this large rib that goes down the back of the seat, which is probably not supposed to be there. So here is a photograph that I found of what the pilot and co-pilot chairs are supposed to look like, and ours doesn't look like that or anywhere near it. So we're just going to clean these up a little bit, and then we are going to take and cut that spline that they have molded into the back of the chair completely out of it. And I'll just use my sprue cutters here to do all the heavy lifting here to get the majority of that out of the way. One piece at a time. What we really don't want to do is we don't want to deform the top of the seat cushion. So we'll just carefully cut that out. And using my file, I'll just take and make sure that that is not prominent or sticking up. And then we'll just sand the edges of the back of the seat down nice and flush and smooth. Getting rid of any irregularities from the molding process, and that'll give us something straight to glue to later. And there is a kind of a raised edge there that you can see, and we need to sand those down nice and straight. So we're going to cover the back of our chairs with this polystyrene sheet, and I think this is 0.5 millimeter, 0. It says 5.2, but you know, it's close enough to be in a half. And what I'm doing is I'm marking it where the top bracket is on the back of the chair there. And we're just going to notch it out so that it fits around it. And then we'll take and flip it over and just take our pencil and mark where the other one is. And we'll go ahead and cut and notch that side out as well. And once we've got the notches done, we can place our polystyrene sheet into place. And we're just going to take some Tamiya Extra Thin, and we're going to glue this slightly oversized piece of polystyrene right to the back of our chair. So I'll give it plenty of time to set up nice and firm for us. And we're going to do this to both chairs. Next, I'm just going to take my scissors. Now this is only 0.5 mil polystyrene, so it cuts fairly easy with a pair of scissors. And we can just use the side of the chair itself as our guide so that we can trim off the excess here. And then we can just take our sanding stick. I'm just using a 400 grit here. And we can just sand them down nice and flush and just dress up all the edges. Now with that done, we can go ahead and check some alignment of some attaching parts here. And these are the brackets or the side frames for our chairs. We just want to make sure that these parts actually fit, and we don't have to do any extra trimming. And I do have a slight problem here. The hole is, or the slot that the pin is supposed to go into isn't quite big enough, and that is from the part itself, nothing that we've done. So I'm just going to take a drill bit and kind of clean that out a little bit to make sure that we've got good positive engagement. And we will check both chairs and make sure that our brackets will go into place. Well, not brackets, but seat frames go into place. And with that done, we can go ahead and glue these down. We're going to need these anyway as reference points for the rest of our scratch building here for the back of our chairs. So it's important that they are secured. And before they set up nice and solid, we need to make sure that everything aligns with the floor of the aircraft here, and that the alignment pins set where it's supposed to. So now we're going to do a little bit of sprue stretching. We need some thin bars for our cross support on the back of the chair, and the smallest brass rod I could find was 1 millimeter. And then for polystyrene, I couldn't find anything smaller than 1.5. So here we're just going to stretch some sprue. Now the slower you stretch your sprue, the thicker the rods are going to be. And so I'm really looking for something between, say, 0.5 and 0.75 millimeter. So we'll go ahead and stretch out some pieces of sprue. Here I've gone ahead and attached a piece of sprue that I've cut to length there, and that's the first cross piece. And next we're going to work on the second cross piece. So I just need a little bit of glue to anchor one end of it, and we're going to set that into place and get it at the correct angle. And then we're just going to really want for that glue to set up enough that that sprue doesn't move around like you see it moving there. I probably need a little bit more glue there, but we'll let that tack up for us while it's in position. That way we're not going to be moving it around too much, and we'll let that set. And once it's stiffened up enough for us, just want to make sure, see, everything's going to be staying in line here. So you can see how it's kind of crossed over, and we're going to have to trim that back. So the first step here is going to be to cut that to length. Now I want it just a shade longer. Yeah, that's a hillbilly measurement, a shade. And we're just going to trim it off there just a little bit extra long. Now the next thing we want to do is make sure that we're right where we want it to connect. So I'm going to press it down and hold it into place. And then we're just going to take our sprue cutters and we're just going to kind of nip it right in the center. Don't really want to cut it completely in two. I want it to kind of stay connected right there. That's kind of a trick, getting it cut just like half of it in two. And then we're just going to tack it into place right on the end. Now, since it's still actually connected in the center, the alignment stays just like we want it to. So we're going to let that glue set up just a little bit. And then we can come back and just trim right where it's overlapping our previous piece of sprue that we put in. And we'll just push that down. And we'll glue both those pieces into place. That way our alignment stays pretty much where we want it to. So I kind of did it this complicated way because I really want all the angles to be correct and have everything line up just like it's supposed to. I do need to adjust that just a little bit before the glue sets up, and yeah, that looks pretty good. All right, we're going to move on. So next up, what we're going to be using is this 1mm in diameter brass rod, and kind of match this up to the framing that's on the sides of our pilot seat and co-pilot seat, and that's the diameter that I've decided on. Now we're going to take and kind of file the end of it down. We need a nice square end to work with. And with it filed square, we can take now and get what measurement that we need. Now, we're not going to be using these sprue cutters. Do not use your sprue cutters to cut brass rod. Okay, that will ruin them. What we have here is we have some wire cutters, and they do have a flat side that'll cut it off pretty much square for us. Since we're using brass rod, we need to use some CA glue. This is medium strength CA glue, and it gives me the opportunity to move these parts around a little bit before it sets and really causes the part to seize in place. So after cutting the three pieces that we need, I'll show you where we're going to put those. We're going to put one on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of super glue in place, and with our brass rod already cut and filed to size, we'll just take and get it to seat right down where it goes, making sure that it's square to the frame, and we don't want it kind of cockeyed there. So that looks pretty good. So we have two more pieces to install. So I'm using my reference photo as a kind of a guide. However, these parts I know are not going to be exactly like the photo, but we do have a couple of brackets on the back of our pilot seat here to kind of work around, but that kind of gives the idea of what we want, so I think it looks pretty decent. So I have used the 0.5mm polystyrene sheet to make up these little boxes here, and it's fairly simple to do. They're nice and square, that's a good thing. And they are attached right on these cross pieces here on the back of the seat itself, and that's where the shoulder straps are anchored for the pilot and co-pilot. So we just need to get those into place. So now I've went ahead and put in a couple of strips. Now this is 0.25 thickness polystyrene here, and it's 1mm by 5mm, I think, or roughly thereabouts. And there's a piece that laps over the top. So there is a metal loop that is supposed to go on top of the seat here that holds our shoulder straps into place. And the way we're going to make that is I've got some copper wire here that I stripped out of some phone line. You know, kind of use what you got. And lucky for me, these Tamiya photo etch pliers have a width of about 3mm, which is really what we need. And that's kind of what we end up with there. So now all we got to do is cut these to the right size. And once they're cut to the right size, we can go ahead and glue them into place. Now, normally the best thing to do would be to drill a couple of holes for these and have them inserted. But since that polystyrene sheet is so thin and that sheet stock is really soft, when you try to drill it, it kind of mushrooms out on us. So we're actually just going to we're going to try to super glue it edge on right onto the polystyrene. And we'll get it here in a second. But we get it lined up, and we'll take and set it into place. And eventually we're going to get it. And that's why I like using the medium set CA glue. It gives you a little bit of time to work with it. Now, I know it doesn't seem like we got a lot done in this video, but we actually accomplished a lot. We took care of some kit issues that probably were part of a storage issue and just the sheer age of the kit. And we managed to get those things hair dried out or ironed out, however you want to look at it. And then we managed to take care of some shortcomings, I think, in the kit, especially when it comes to the seats. And if we decide to display our Huey with the doors open, there will be plenty of items of interest in there, which we're going to continue to work on in our next video. Add a little bit of extra stuff that the kit doesn't come with, and especially in this particular kit. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for watching. Special thanks to my subscribers. It's because of you guys that I continue to make these videos and do these builds for you. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, I hope I earned your subscription today. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss part 2 of our Huey build. And as always, I love to hear from you guys, so leave me a comment in the comment sections if you'd like. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.